You've all seen how many people have died in every battle the Confederation has had with its exiles. The numbers still haunt me. Whole army groups were destroyed in just a few hours by Biot Titan weapons. Armor divisions were ripped apart by Biot Titan weapons. Our garrisons were smashed to pieces by the relentless advances of their warrior forms. And our fleets were gutted and torn to pieces on the orbits of every world we defended with fleets that darkened the stars. Besides demanding that the invaded species give up completely, they use the living's biological material to make more of their own. They are horrible, and will fight any kind of war that gives them a tactical advantage. They don't feel fear, but they know how to abuse psychotropic drugs, terror tactics, and targeting civilians and the injured for maximum psychological effect. When we were told that a new race would be human, it would join the one more young race to put through the torture of war, a few more ships to buy us some extra time to get civilians and injured people to safety. Varick talk is bad for morale when it's low. We started betting on how long people would fight before running scared back to their home system and waiting to be killed. The bets were as depressing as our chances of making it to the next day. The 17th Army Group was told to buy time and delay them in any way possible. We were given human reinforcements from the Fifth Order, but I have no idea what that means. Apparently, they had a commander with a lot of experience from the last interhuman war of unification. We couldn't care less, and I'm sure the Zax didn't care either at first. If any of you have been lucky enough to never see those 3 times cursed jerks go to war, I bless your minds, my kinsmen. As a heavily genetically modified race that existed before the Confederation, we didn't know or care about their origins. That day, they attacked with their fear-inducing bioforms of flesh and bone made from every biological form they killed, captured, and harvested with graft weapons. They also brought their spider tanks and super heavy armor that crushed the ground on grav engines. Their lightest armor was much bigger than ours. Their ships would fire harshly into orbit, not caring about friendly fire or civilian deaths. To them, we were just more flesh to harvest for making new warrior forms for war, so they came firing corrosive bolts of acid that ate tanks and bunkers beams of catalytic energy to melt and bubble flesh and bone. And then they came with saws, spikes, and other sharp and blunt appendages made from bio-enhanced bone to butcher, kill, harvest, and feed. I had seen enough, friend. 20 million living things were counting on us to hold the line, so I swear I did try. We had our heaviest armor anchored behind defensive positions, plasma shields with enough artillery to level mountains, and war scorers that were bigger than the buildings in the cities we were protecting. We fought with everything we had, 100 species ready for war, plasma and laser weapons at the ready, servo armor clean and ready to go, trenches dug, and men at their posts. The battle started at 7:12 local time. The perimeter was broken at 9:01 local time, which was 10 minutes later than even the most optimistic predictions. I broke the rules of my command to beg the humans to send anything they had to the spaceport to protect as many civilians as they could. At 902, I'm sure you've all read the transcript of my court case, Marshal. Yes, I did shoot my superior officer because he wouldn't swallow his pride and ask for help. Yes, I have no regrets. The humans responded at 9:03 with one sing. Okay, knights are on their way. Look to the heavens, we're coming. I looked up at the sky. I didn't know what that word meant, knight. The translator just gave me a simple explanation. A mounted soldier in armor. Then it changed to someone dedicated to a cause, but at that moment I couldn't care less. Then I saw it in the sky. Have any of you ever seen a real meteor shower? Not one of those fake ones. It was like fine rain falling on legends from a time that was doomed. I remember thinking how few of them there were and how little strength they had, but I was amazed that they had jumped into the fires of the 9 hells willingly and able to do so. Their fall inspired my men to dig deeper and refuse to give up until the humans arrived. They came to die with us, so the least we could do was stay alive until they got there. I gave the human commander the coordinates for what he called nightfall. I had no idea what inbound, he said, laughing at his own suicidal wish. I laughed too. Splash area, what were tyrannies? I didn't know, but I didn't care at that point. We had breached full of enemy armor. And that meant, but I gave it to him anyway. Prepare for impact and clear splash area tyrannies are my forces were starting to break apart. I remember throwing everything I had at the Exact spider tank as it crawled over the wall at breach sticks. It was covered in warrior forms and weapons, and its thick spider legs helped it over the wall, spewing fire and death. I fired my pistol because what else could I do? Helixes and Tonians were firing everything they had at the beast's thick hide. We weren't even denting it, but we ran out of proper anti-armor 10 minutes earlier when the previous tank broke through the perimeter. A crazy brave private had run up to the tank and jumped on it, setting off 2 full belts of grenades. We didn't have any more crazy brave privates, and even if we did, we didn't have any more grenades with that much of a yield. The tank fired its main plasma accelerator at a squad to my left, turning their bodies into half-melted flesh before training it on us. I remember wondering what death would feel like, and if there was really something after death. Then there was a sound like shrieking. A world or beast that made me feel something primal, an image of scales, claws, fire, and wings that covered the sun that landed right on the tank. The shock wave was so strong that it sent me to the floor and the warrior form on the tank flying. The armor on the tank cracked and shattered, and fluids and blood oozed from the impact zones. There was a strange and eerie silence for a moment while I got up and looked at what had happened. From the smoke, I could see 5 figures, just 5, that looked like they were part of an army. They were covered head to toe in sleek black armor that made them taller than any Phylixian or Orobo. They looked like mythical gods. The black armor was decorated with marks and sigils that I didn't understand at the time, and I still don't understand some of them. The first figure had some kind of holographic armor over its power plate, and it was a bright orange flying quadder. Mirrored that, taking on the shape of the head of that reptile. The visor lenses shone under the beast's snout, and its ears grew into wings of office that decorated the helmet. Its deep orange cape flapped almost lazily in the wind. Yes, it did have a cape on a battlefield. I remember thinking it was so stupid after the battle was over, but at the time it gave them the look of mythical power, like they were in a children's fairy tale, and decided that the Exacts were bad enough to come from those fairy tales. The worst thing about them wasn't their capes or decorated armor, it was their weapons. They had weapons on their lower backs and on their shoulders, but they didn't have rifles or long guns in their hands. Instead, they held hammers and daggers. The leader, a warrior dressed like a reptile, had 2 long blades in each hand, and one of his friends had a roaring go. It looked like the breaching axe our firefighters used to get into buildings, but it was much more alien and deadly. The third was the biggest of the group. It towered over the others and carried a brutal 2-handed hammer with the head of some kind of canid reassembled on its chest. That canid was howling on a huge pillar behind I&D. The fourth was much shorter and was crouching over a warrior form, poking it with one. One was covered in bones and feathers that made it look like the devil from an old story. The others were scary, but this one seemed tailor-made for it. It had a collar of teeth around its neck and looked like it was trying to cut up pieces of the dead warrior form until it realized they were still alive. The last one was smaller than the others, but taller than the others. Its armor showed a blue tree of some kind standing tall among us. After a few moments of silence, the reptile warrior spoke on the open channel and speakers. The laws of chivalry require me to give you a chance to surrender or retreat from this world. The offer is made. Choose quickly or face Jovian wrath. It took me one crazy second to realize it was making the offer to the Xylax. I asked myself, who would be so stupid to make such an offer to a species hellbent on the extermination and incorrupt, opened fire on them, and that's when the real killing started. After what seemed like an hour of nonstop fire, but was really only seconds, the Zlak stopped and looked at what was left of the 5 humans in the smoke. The sane voice spoke up. "We'll take that as a polite thank you, but no tyranny." Amaranth then killed them all, and then the hypervelocity slugs came. I had seen railguns fire from cruisers and heavy tanks before, but never from shoulder mounts like the blue fire, razor-sharp slugs of Meta. Tearing them apart into pieces of flesh, one volley 5 knights, and 20 dead warrior forms, I still can't believe they charged into melee combat, which seemed even more dangerous than giving the Xyalks the terms of surrender. I fully expected those huge flesh miners to tear those 5 apart. That's when I understood what the word knight meant. A mounted warrior in armor and a human devoted to a cause earth their home. While there was some beautiful plants and animals, and dangerous animals that could kill with just a touch, the humans themselves were what made it a death world. They weren't physically impressive, at least not more so than our fitter races, but they did have 2 dangerous traits. The first was an almost endless supply of creativity and the will to keep going. They wouldn't give up or retreat if they could get something done. The second part is their psionic gift. I'm sure most of you have heard the rumors that humanity experimented on itself to reach a higher level of psionics. This is true, as confirmed to me by their high-ranking officers and widely believed by their people. They have amazing powers like the ability to communicate telepathically, boost their speed and strength, and more. I lied to the senators. They have another gift, though I would prefer to keep it a secret. Their psionics are just as powerful as their weapons. They have armor that is linked to their souls, which is an old word for mind-powered weapons that can easily cut through reinforced ship plating. They can also make things spontaneously catch fire, cast real lightning from their hands, and fly so fast that I barely saw the reptile warrior when he shot forward on some kind of anti-gravity harness that let him achieve it. It tore apart and shredded 6 warriors like paper. It was protected. Every time it slowed down enough for me to catch up with its movements, I could see the shimmer of a protective aura. At a distance, its shoulder-mounted cannon and the weapon hanging from his hip. A kind of assault rifle based on projectiles speeding up to 1% of the speed of light. Made quick work of the warrior forms. But up close. I might have compared them to gods of death, but the humans had a better name for them. They called them angels of death. I saw one with a hammer crush tanks, another with a spear kill leader forms from impossible angles, and a lion warrior's axe cut transports open and tear them to pieces. The one with feathers carved Xyal warriors like animals looking for weak spots and just trying to scare people. They held that breach and sent 100 of them to help us. It was like seeing real myths because of how fast, powerful, and fierce they were, and how they seemed to know exactly where enemy fire would come from before it happened. I saw them read each other and deal with threats. I saw a knight cut off the turret of an enemy tank and fire his gun inside it, while 2 of its companions killed commander forms that rushed him in perfect sync. They moved and killed, and went uni. As the reptile warrior he was, he killed so many Xyla warriors, commanders, and armor that when he rushed back to be one of the last of his kind to get on the evacuation ships, he was covered in blood, oil, and radioactive dust that his engineers had to cut him out of the armor. He seemed happy about it, and so did they all. They joked, laughed, and shared feats. While we were in transit, I had the pleasure of traveling in a human cruiser, whose name I will never forget. The men acted like they were a symbol of humanity. They were always proud and determined. Whenever they walked into a room, the sailors would salute and stand to attention, even though I thought they didn't have to. When I asked why, the commander of an infantry unit named Alastair Whiteborn told me that the knights are some of the most gifted psionics in the world and have been trained to the point of breaking to make a corps of enhanced super soldiers capable of dragons, an ancient predator from human mythology, formed packs called tyrannies. These tyrannies turned into wings, which turned into flights, and those flights turned into thunders. I asked why they were called thunders, and the reptile warrior, whose name I later learned was Sirius Amaranth of Europa, a moon orbiting Jupiter, told me that if you've ever heard the sound of almost 100 knights flying through the air, that's the thunder. We lost that battle because they didn't have the troops or supplies to keep fighting for a long time, but our casualty rates were lower than X's for the first time in years. I don't know what Admiral Copen will say, but I saw the Xyla fleet as we left the planet. Their flagship was 6 kilometers long, which is twice as long as our biggest dreadnought. Their railguns can send absolutes through space. Their energy lances, pulsars, and other weapons are far superior to anything I have seen before. I almost cried with joy when their ship started the first orbital bombardment of the Thylax forces on the ground, turning the world's surface into molten glass and denying those jerks any biological material. As my personal opinion and recommendation to this august body of the Confederation, I would like to be blunt and say, humanity is a fact, not just the opinion of a dust-neck infantryman. They have technology and firepower beyond ours because they've fought each other for hundreds of years and learned how to fight in ways we could only dream of. They understand conflict and battle, and they thrive in it. They have fought among themselves for thousands of years, and their unity hasn't made them weaker. Instead, it's their strong moral code that drove them. To help us, they had to drop from the sky and lose a dozen knights and hundreds of regular soldiers. They did it because, in Knight Amaranth's own words, it was the right thing to do. They value things like honor, duty, right, and truth. They believe in ideas that are thousands of years old and have only recently decided to return to the center of their society. They fight for what is right and for those who can't fight for themselves. We need their help. Knight, they need to win this war. They have armies of trained soldiers and veteran soldiers from previous conflicts, as well as battalions of armor that makes our own armor look weak. From what I heard and saw, their war striders are made to take over continents, and it's all coordinated by their psionic gift, which they call unity. They are a terrifying and war-tested engine of war, and they don't care when innocent people die. They want to fight these monsters. There is something evil that can't be reasoned with. Maybe it's not enough, or maybe it never was, but for the first time since the massacre started, we made the tax pause. They have slowed their advance to the southern and northern rims, and their full frontal offensive to the mid-rim has stopped. They are building fortresses and offensive networks in worlds they haven't yet taken over or harvested, which is something they had never done before. And they are bringing some kind of void stations from space. Now that they've lost momentum and been shown to be beatable, I say to the senators, let's not let them down. Call up the reserves, heat up the war industry, open up all of our arsenals, and lift all restrictions and arms limits on the Confederation. Then, give the humans all the help we can afford, as well as all the resources and information we have on the enemy, and let them do what humanity has a history of doing well, which is what I saw during the weeks of Transy. They fought in 2 world wars, the Eugenics Crusades, the Cayenne Blitz, and the Massacre of the Inner Belt. There was also the rise of the Hierophant Court, the Dragon Fall, and the Dragon Rise battles. There was also the Cry of the Blood of Mars, the War of Cinders, the Breaking of Luna, and the Defense of Earth killing Monsters Field. During the Senate session, Marshal Udy argued for adding the authority of the soul to this Lord Commander Candon Leonos was put in charge of the Eastern Front, while her husband, Lord Sirius Amaranth, was in charge of the Northern Rim. These were the best fronts, and they were the only ones that were able to destroy a Zil world form.